Thank you all for your time today. Wanted to talk before we run out of time to talk about Giving Tuesday. Yes, it's August, but our next one's going to be in October and too late to make changes. So I wanted to highlight some Giving Tuesday studies that are out there and some that are sort of tangentially related to Giving Tuesday, but important nonetheless. So without further ado, my goal here was talk about Giving Tuesday strategies, who Giving Tuesday donors are, get some dialogue about what you have found to be effective, and also not to use any more sources. So want to make sure that this isn't an infomercial. I've used a few in the past couple, so I wanted to go cold turkey and not have any from where I would be biased. So this is all external to Moore, and we have some results from across the sector. So first two studies are from the Indiana University's Institute on Philanthropy, IUPUI. A lot of great studies over there, especially in their work on gender and giving. So highly recommend. But they had two studies. Both of them are from 2018, so a little bit older, but give some interesting patterns and research on Giving Tuesday. So the first one is who's giving on Giving Tuesday. And then the second one is kind of a summary of a lot of different studies on Giving Tuesday. So I wanted to highlight both of those. First one, gender differences in giving. They wanted to look at what those are and who's giving and what organizations they're giving to. So let's get the obvious out of the way. Giving goes up on Giving Tuesday. I know we're all shocked, I say, to know that online giving goes up on a day when everyone is asking for gifts. Okay, with that out of the way, we can look a little bit at gender differences. So women, they found, are more likely to be giving on Giving Tuesday than men. And there's not much difference in the average gift, but the increase in likelihood of giving means that the bulk of giving is coming from women. While they make up 51% of donations in the entire year, they made up 61% of Giving Tuesday donations. That was down actually a little bit from early on in Giving Tuesday, so 65% then. But I think it's safe to say there is still a bit of a gender divide here. Looking across, you can see exactly, obviously, the spike in giving, but how women went up by significantly more than men. And the researchers had a few hypotheses as to why that was. First was that women were asked more often. People give because they're asked, and there has been research that says that women are more likely to be actively solicited for donations. However, the study talked about that generally, not just on Giving Tuesday. And so that's not, in my opinion, it's not particularly a reason why women would give more on Giving Tuesday, but rather a reason that they would be more likely to give overall. We know that especially with transaction-based segmentation, you tend to ask the people who have given more. And if there's a historical bias on who's been giving in the past, there's going to be a current bias as to who's giving, unless you allow those other factors to go in there. I would wager that this may change somewhat. We've talked about on, I believe, this call, but there was a study of how jobs are advertised. And, this is an area where there's significant legal language in place to say you can't advertise differentially to men and women. However, there's if researchers advertised for a STEM job on Facebook now, and they found that, pardon me, they found that men were 30% more likely to get the ad than women. And it wasn't necessarily because there was bias in the targeting, it's because it wasn't taken into account. And because women are the targets of so many other ads on Facebook, they're more likely to be targeted for other ads. Facebook will go and say, okay, you want to minimize your budget. We're going to advertise to the people where there's less competition for the advertising, which in this case is men. And so I am guessing that during Giving Tuesday, especially, that advertising is going to be changing this as it becomes more expensive to advertise to women. So there may be a shift in the gender dynamic since the study and going forward. There is research that shows that women are more likely to be using Facebook, Pinterest, and Instagram, especially on this time. Men are more likely to be on Twitter at the time of this, and I would imagine still now. So because so much of Giving Tuesday giving is driven by either organic or paid social media advertising, that may be a reason why. There is research that shows that the social media may be an outcome of women being more likely to build relationships and a sense of community and give collaboratively. And so Giving Tuesday is a day that focuses on that. So that could be a reason. There's evidence that at the time, at least, women tended to use their cell phones more often, and a lot more mobile giving for Giving Tuesday than other times of the year. Among college students, at least, women spent more time on their phones than men, are more likely to use their cell phones in a community focused way. So this could be have synergy with some of the other explanations. And volunteers are the more likely to give, and women are more likely to volunteer than men. However, this would also be a reason why they'd be more likely to give throughout the year, not just on Giving Tuesday. So I personally am more persuaded by reasons 2 through 4. Your mileage may vary. Would love to hear any thoughts. Okay. Hopefully then that was because I was so persuasive, and we'll just go on to the next. On Giving Tuesday, this is giving among women. There are sectors that have significantly more jump than others, education being highest among those. Giving Tuesday, giving actually drops among women for arts and culture, but then a significant jump up in education. And that could be a factor of asking, or it could be that this is during a school year, and so education is more salient than other areas. Unclear from the research why this would be, rather than just it is. They also looked at types of Giving Tuesday donors. This also may have changed since the research. 75% of Facebook donors were new Facebook donors on Giving Tuesday. Or sorry, 75% of Giving Tuesday donors were first-time Facebook donors. That doesn't mean that they were new to giving, new to online donations more broadly, new to giving to the organization. It's just new within the platform. And so Facebook holds this up as, see, we're bringing new people into philanthropy. Not really. You're bringing new people into Facebook is bringing new people into Facebook donation. And until they share their data, we won't be able to look at other indicators there. I assume that will happen shortly after we're able to successfully get snowballs into hell. They don't seem very sharing data focused right now or ever. There was a DataKind sample that said that 63% of donors gave only on Giving Tuesday, but not at any other time. We see this type of seasonality in a number of areas. I know that when I was with Mothers Against Drunk Driving, looking just at mail data, so this is offline, this is not online, but about 9% of people who gave 5 times or more in the previous 5 years, 9% of those folks gave only in 1 month or in 2 consecutive months. So November, December, January were the most popular ones, but we also had some people who likely, given the nature of that organization, were giving every year on the anniversary of the crash of those sorts of things. 9% doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're restricting it to only those people who gave 5 times in 5 years, the opportunity for them to give only on 1 month is very low, in fact. And so the fact that 9% popped is pretty significant. And so you do have a seasonality effect to these donors. And then there was a Classy research that found that about 19% of donors who gave on Giving Tuesday returned within the first 90 days. Now, end of year giving is in that time frame. And so people who give on time-based parameters, let's say, are very focused on that. Probably likely those are going to be the two periods that they're most likely to give. So I'm guessing that's a decent part of it. But they did find that compared with Giving Day events and other sort of one-day fundraisers, Giving Tuesday folks were a little bit more likely to retain. And then personalized communications are better. Not shocking for those of you on this call, I'm sure. They did find that social information increases average gift when you put in here's what other people are giving. They said that there's a greater impact on the beginning or the end of the program. There is some counter evidence to this, so take that with a grain of salt. And then many of you know, Emily, early money is like yeast, it helps raise the dough. When you look at social information, it's better to have few big gifts going into Giving Tuesday than fewer large than more smaller gifts if you have the same amount of money. And the thinking there is that having those large gifts tends to draw up the average gift. And so that type of anchoring technique is very helpful. And it's not surprising. We've done this in mid-level giving and major giving, in especially capital campaigns, for years and years and years, where they have a silent period of the campaign and then go public when they have a number of large donations in pocket. We'll actually talk about that technique later on as we talk about goal gradients. So they also looked at how organizations give when multiple people ask simultaneously. There is a bit of a flight to quality. People reduce the number of organizations that they give to, and they give to those that are most well-known generally and most well-known by that organization. So there's kind of this flight to quality on Giving Tuesday. Interestingly, and they didn't elaborate more on this, but I think it's worth additional research. They said that when you ask about who do you want to give to, you got different answers, whether it was who do you want to give to online, who do you want to give to offline, who do you want to give to by text, those sorts of organizations. And so people think of nonprofits associated with different channels, which is very interesting, and I wish I knew more about it. Any questions on any of the Indiana University information or comments on research that you've done, patterns you are seeing, that sort of thing? Okay, hearing none, away we go. Common Great looked at last year's results, so we have a little bit more of a recent activity here, looking at the emails that were sent and what's effective and what's not. So Giving Tuesday, one of the most common phrases and subject lines, not surprisingly, giving words also very popular in subject lines. And as we will see later on, match is somewhere down the list, but still pretty popular. The question is, are those the most effective subject lines on Giving Tuesday? And it turned out that they were not. So they looked at these subject lines versus a database of all of the different subject lines that people had sent out and the results that came from those in order to score those subject lines. And none of those that were at the top mentioned donation, mentioned ask, mentioned Giving Tuesday. And in fact, you can see a common thread throughout 4 of these 5 subject lines. And it's the idea of the question. And this idea that we're not entirely sure in looking at some of those, what they're about. You know, a little of your time, question mark, how many more have to die? It provokes this idea of interest. And this is a common technique in email subject lines or outer envelope tests. And it goes back to this idea from Jerome Kagan, who's one of the founders of developmental psychology, did this paper in 1972. And he said that one of our basic modes in human behavior is, quote, uncertainty resolution. We want to go from a state where we don't know to a state where we know about things. And there's been subsequent reference to this in other studies. There's an exception to this kind of rule that people will actually pay not to know bad news or news that could be bad. But otherwise, by and large, when we have uncertainty about something, there's this curiosity that wells up in it that makes us want to find out, which goes to one of the most successful subject lines I've ever been able to use. I've used it in a subject line, I've used it as an outer envelope, and I've used it across organizations, although it started with my time at MAD, and it's look what you've done. Following up with a discussion of the impact that the person has been able to that the impact that a person's been able to have through their giving, through their volunteering and things like that. But there's this uncertainty about what it is, because there's also the look what you've done finger wagging approach to it. And so there's actually this idea that comes out of psychology called the Zeigarnik effect. Psychologist Bluma Zeigarnik, she was watching waiters in Vienna and found out that their memory was great for orders that were coming in and very bad for those that had already been served. And so she went back to the lab and found that our memories are better for unfinished things or incomplete things. And part of why it feels good for us to cross things off a list is we no longer have to think about it. It's out of our mind. We've moved it from uncertain to certain. So there's a question in the chat. Do you think that Giving Tuesday has been around long enough that charitable people know what Giving Tuesday is all about and expecting it? Or is it a fundraiser that's affected, not in the general public? The answer that we see in a lot of our surveying is yes, which is a little weird, but in surveying, the general public is about evenly split about their knowledge of Giving Tuesday. Some will say that they know, but also say that they don't have a really good grasp of what it is, why it started, why it exists. And so you have about half the population where it's not even an event for them. Then you have another segment of the population that they kind of know, and they may go so far as to understand that they get a bunch of emails on that day. And then your question is well phrased, because you say charitable people, do they know what Giving Tuesday is all about? People who are very thoughtful and engaged in their giving are far more likely to know about Giving Tuesday and to plan for it. And so one of the things that you'll see in these studies, and I'll note it later on in one particular study, but we don't necessarily know to what extent Giving Tuesday, or really any one-time event, is bringing in new donations versus shifting the timing of existing donations. And so there's a research study that found that about 63% of a new mail pieces revenues aren't new, but rather pulled from the pieces on either side of them mostly, but from other pieces. They would have gotten the donation anyway. And this was for an organization that, if I'm remembering correctly, did something like 4 to 6 times mailing per year. So this cannibalization is clearly going on in our sector, especially the mail. But likely has to happen online as well. I will say that Giving Tuesday, when they created it, whether this was intentional or not, I think that it's because of the immediacy of digital far enough away from end of year that you're not pulling a lot of those donations out. But it is kind of an unofficial kickoff to the giving season. And so I think we've made it a thing. It is a fundraisers event. There's a little bit in the zeitgeist in general public, but it is not huge. And someone who is just getting into philanthropy is not likely to know about it as much. And so I think part of what I think is very salient about this question, thank you, Amy, for bringing it up, is part of why the subject lines that don't mention Giving Tuesday may work better is that they're not focused on the when of giving, they're focused on the why. They're about the organization, the person's tied to the organization, and they work even if someone doesn't know that it's Giving Tuesday, which I think is very helpful. A note in the chat, Giving Tuesday is coming up, time to unsubscribe from all of my mailing lists. We also, and there's some evidence that we're seeing this in political fundraising, my goodness. There was a story a few months ago that said, oh, there's AI is going to start writing political emails, and it's like, they hadn't already. I had just assumed that there was a rogue AI, Skynet, whatever, that was churning out political emails as they go. So yes, part of why these subject lines may also work is that they don't look like the sea of sameness that is going into email boxes around this time. When you look at what is happening, if people are getting multiple emails from multiple different organizations on Giving Tuesday, and 43% of them say Giving Tuesday in the subject line. So, you know, if you get 20 Giving Tuesday emails, and what would that be? 14 of them, 14 or 15 of them, sorry, 20 Giving Tuesday emails, and I totally did the math wrong on that, and 8 of them mention Giving Tuesday in the subject line. Those 8 are going to look very similar and indistinguishable from each other, whereas something with something unique to the organization or building up a sense of interest could be very beneficial at that time. Match was mentioned in 20% of subject lines, so of that person getting 20, you're going to get 4 with a match in the subject line. Most of them a double, some of them a triple. And we've talked a lot about matching gift campaigns here on the testing roundtable. Happy to go through if it's of interest, we can go into greater depth on matching and opportunities there. But this is the reminder this is a study of the Bavarian State Opera, but they sent out mail pieces with different types of matches on them. And it's vitally important that when you think about your match, you're also thinking about structure. By and large, and this also jives with research here in the United States by John List and others. I apologize for not knowing the other names. But by and large, increasing the size of your match beyond even 50% doesn't help all that much. Unless you're escalating beyond, you know, for some, there's a perceived arms race on Giving Tuesday. How high can I get that match amount? That may be a little bit overblown, but structure is vitally important, because you can, if you're going for a response rate, the best thing to do is to say, every gift that comes in this case, it was generates a match of 10 euros. You give €1, we match it with 10 euros. You give 100 euros, we match it with 10 euros. And let me be clear, euros, not euros, which, while tasty, would not be as helpful for nonprofits. So that type of fixed gift match, very helpful in terms of increasing response rate, but tends to suppress average gift versus other ones, because you're trying to get those more marginal donors in the door. And then likewise, if you're looking to increase average gift, a nonlinear match, a lead donor approach, those sorts of things are better about that. A nonlinear match is the idea is we'll match everything over and above, and I think it was 50 euros in this study. So if you gave 51 euros, we'll match €1. If you give 100 euros, we'll match 50 euros. But this also shows that lead donor gifts can actually work better than matches, because there's presumably not this crowding out effect. And so you can see slight dip in response rate, but significant jumps up in average gift. So lead gifts, and challenges can work as well or better than matches. And so matches tend to work better for active donors. There's some research that lapsed donors do not, and acquisition audiences perhaps don't give as well to matches. That said, your mileage may vary, especially if you have been match heavy in the past. You have self-selected for, and people have self-selected for you, a match heavy audience. People who like matches will be more on your file. And so definitely meet people where they are when possible. So that was the study of emails there. Any questions on any of that? Okay. Since I was scouring far and wide, Blue State Digital had a couple of tests they posted with Covenant House. First one was, what should I send as pre-emails to my Giving Tuesday folks, Cyber Monday and Giving Tuesday email series? So the Monday and Tuesday emails stayed the same. And then they looked at revenue across the campaign. And they said, okay, volume worked. When we sent both emails, people were 30% more likely to donate than Thanksgiving, getting an email on Thanksgiving alone, 42% more likely to donate than those getting one on Black Friday alone, and 18% more likely to donate than those who get no emails. So let me add a question mark to that. Volume worked because no emails beat one email. And so if you're looking at this, it was 2 emails, no email, Thanksgiving email, Black Friday email in terms of results. And so volume worked, but that order is weird to be able to make the contention that we should be going pell-mell for volume over this time. The other question, and I mentioned this earlier, is did they get more donations or did they pull more donations into this timing? And you really want to be looking at that horizon when you're doing this type of testing. It's ideal to do it with a donor cohort that you can especially follow through end of year. Yes, it would be great if we did 12-month, also 12-year, but 12-month longitudinal studies. What does the impact of this mean for 1 year long? But honestly, if you can get through end of year with that type of test, you're doing great. And that should be able to tell you, hey, this technique worked, or no, this technique looked like it worked, but it really just brought donations into this time period. So based on that, next year, they looked at 2 different pre-emails. You can see the left one is an ask, and the right one is a cultivation email. Here's how Covenant House kids are celebrating this holiday weekend, kind of what your impact is doing at Covenant House. And those who got the no ask cultivation were 7% more likely to donate over the course of the campaign. So it wasn't necessarily that they got an ask before Giving Tuesday. It was that they were primed to give during that time period with cultivation emails. So this may be a way of helping, like those subject lines, a way of combating that fatigue that folks can get from those emails. This next one came up when I was looking for Giving Tuesday research, not because it is actually Giving Tuesday, but it is a giving day. So Alaska has I forget exactly what it stands for, PFD, but I believe it's part of the fund that you get living in Alaska for the use for petroleum companies to use for oil drilling. And, every Alaskan gets that. And so there's a significant effort to try to get Alaskans to donate that money. And so there's a great opportunity to test different treatments there. And in the asking, the researchers frame this as benefits to yourself. What's going to happen when you give? You're going to warm your heart. Versus benefits to others. What's going to happen when you give? You're going to make Alaska better for everyone. So, thinking in your head which one I guess I don't know where else you think, but thinking which you think would win out this. They did this over a 3-year period. In each of the years, the focus on the self had more in total donations. Individuals who received a self-focused appeal were about 7% more likely to give, and they gave 23% more on average than their counterparts in the control group, whereas the other focused messaging had a little bit of a bump. You can see from the control to, but not near what that self-focused messaging can do. So very interesting, because we focus so much of our asking on what is this going to do for the recipient? And I'm going to posit a slightly different reasoning than the researchers gave for this. So they frame this as benefits to self and benefits to others. However, there is research from Cialdini, among others, that if it is not about the emotion that you make someone feel as the result of your appeal, it's about the emotion that they feel like they are going to feel as a result of their donation. And the way they did this is pretty fascinating. They gave they made people positive, negative, neutral by getting them to write about happy or depressing or neutral things. And then among those groups, they gave half of them a magical mood freezing pill, and they didn't give that pill to anyone else. Now, before you ask, no, that pill doesn't actually exist, but the placebo effect does. And so people thought, there's nothing that I can do to change my mood for an hour when they had that pill. And people who were put into a negative state of mind, who didn't have the pill, were much more likely than other folks in the study to want to help someone else. I want to feel better, therefore I'm going to engage in this pro-social behavior. But people who were given the pill, who said, okay, I can't change the mood that I'm in, didn't help. And so that was the difference among the recipients. And so sometimes when you specifically call out the emotion that someone will feel as a result of their giving, it can make for a very effective appeal. And so warm your heart, yes, it's self-focused, but it's really telling someone what's going to happen as a result of their gift, which can be for the recipient or it can be for the self. Calling it out, making it for the self is effective, calling it out is even more effective. Whereas make Alaska better for everyone, it's specificity is the soul of narrative, and that is a pretty vague solution ask that you have there. So probably cutting against that. And then finally, a couple of things that we've talked about in other testing roundtables, but do definitely apply here. Goal gradient behavior is the idea of how filled is your thermometer. We talked about having those big gifts in place to begin with. This was a study had a couple of components. First one was of Kiva, and Kiva crowdfunding studies or projects, I guess it would be, were significantly more likely to make progress when they were more than 2/3 done, then more than 1/3 done, then less than 1/3 done. And people want to be a part of a project that is going to close, that is going to be effective. And so you get more progress the closer you are to your goal. Similarly, this was a field experiment conducted in partnership with a local chapter of an international disaster relief charity among lapsed donors. And they said, we are blank percent to our goal. And 10%, 66% had really no difference. But when you were 85% of the way to the goal, people were far more likely to want to give. And so that sense of progress really did help people. So that's what I had from the research. Other Giving Tuesday tips and tricks that you have, other questions that you'd like to ask? Okay. Hearing none, thank you very much for your time today. Please let me know if you have any questions, and look forward to talking with you in the times to come. I'm at nellinger@wearemore.com. Feel free to shout out any questions that you have, topics that you would like for future sessions, or things that you would like to present. We would love to have your tests featured. Thank you and have a good day.